Hi, and welcome to the Masters of Modern. This is part 2 of this week. We are today talking about what our pitches for the future of Magicfests. We're going to have a cool conversation on what we think Magicfests could look like as we move forward and what they can kind of be. And we have some cool ideas. If you missed, we were previously talking about like the world turning on with COVID and what that looks like. So definitely check out part 1, as well as listen to the whole podcast right now on audio or on Patreon. You get the whole video a week early. The whole podcast is out there right now. Please comment below on what you would want a Magicfest to look like. And hit that like and subscribe button over there. Hit it right now. It's time with the thumb up. Okay. Honestly, as soon as I could go to a Magic event again, I will be on the first plane to the first Magic Fest after this. And it's going to be interesting to see, what do Magic Fests look like in the future? I mean, we were talking about before this happened that Wizards had strong incentives to phase out the Grand Prix system and to kind of move away from that model. And they were already kind of doing that in the way that Pro Play was structured. They've also totally reformatted, and then COVID happened, how Pro Play works in general, to the extent that I couldn't even explain to you now what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's all these like weird holes where it's like, oh, the person who won the last Mythic Championship isn't invited to the next Mythic Championship or whatever. Like,
right.
Because it's so complicated, I can't, say. But there's like people with like a lot of success who are like, not qualified for random stuff, or like, people who are like very nearly rivals or whatever, who are just like, oh, I'm not qualified for anything because it's all or nothing. And it still seems like it's a bit of a shambles. But right now, I think that makes sense because literally everything in the world is in a shambles.
Correct.
But hopefully they're taking this time to think about OP, and especially especially paper OP, and figure out what to do with it, because we haven't got a lot of movement on digital OP. Pretty much all they did for this year was just remove all the physical components of organized play, and they kept rivals in the MPL and Mythic Championships or whatever, and they were just going to do what they did with no paper play. And it kind of worked out for them because they had separated them into like 2 different trees that I had to learn about to explain on the podcast when they first did it. I don't know where things are at now, to be honest. But
there's complaints about that. There's like pretty significant prize money that was promised that just kind of was removed that people qualified for, but that was another COVID thing. And then there's the complaint of like, working in manufacturing and retail. Yes, COVID had negative effects on the market, but the one place it did well on, it sounds like, is hobbies, activities, and consumer goods. So Wizards actually did better last year than years before. So the argument of why they had to cut that prize pool has maybe fallen short for people. On the other hand, they've also proven, maybe we don't need to support this to have this be a successful brand. Maybe these other things that we're doing are going to be better suited to grow this brand than investing a ton of money in prize support for paper tournaments.
Well, that's the thing. I think that CFBE or Channel Fireball, CFBE being Channel Fireball Events, the events vision of Channel Fireball, which I think is not operating right now, but
sure,
some version of CFBE or Star City Games or whoever, somebody is going to fill the void and run paper Magic events. Big ones, right? Like, now, does that look more like an old Grand Prix or like an old Star City, where it's like, here is a tournament with some side stuff? Is it going to look more like a Magic Fest, where it's like, we're making an active effort to bring some side stuff to our tournament? Or is it going to be a convention that either doesn't have a single big tournament, or it has a couple of big tournaments? But I mean, like, Gen Con has huge Magic tournaments,
but they're not officially supported.
It's not. It's a convention, right? With Magic tournaments. Now, obviously, like, Magic is never going to put on something as big as Gen Con with just the one brand, right? But there's going to be like, you can do something where it's like, here's like a couple of big cash prize. Here's like a couple of 5Ks. We're doing a 5K on Saturday and a 5K on Sunday. That's the whole prize. Have fun. There's artists, there's cosplayers, there's like panels and whatever have you.
I think that the SEG system probably restarts, because their reasoning for running those has nothing to do with the tournament series, and is way more to do with, like, that's how they buy product, is they run these tournament events around the country. It's much more of a purchasing show. And so for them, I can see them starting up shortly, because I know that's something they've had issues with COVID. I could see Magic Fest Vegas coming back, or like there being 4 Magicfest Vegas sized events, one maybe every season, and maybe per country or per region as like major Magic conventions, right? Like, because Magic Fest Vegas is not a GP. It's a convention that has 3 GPs happening over a 3-day weekend, and that has always been successful and is a good PR moment for Wizards. Beyond that, like, I may be partnering more with like the stuff like Gen Con, like grassroots it again, doing the 2 GPs a weekend all year round and have that be attached to pro play sounds like such an endeavor for something that I feel like is going to be quick to pick up. Now, on the other hand, like, they don't have to be what they were recently. They don't have to be those like netting 2,000 attendees per event tournaments. They can go back to being the like 250 people doing standard at LA Convention Hall that was like two years ago on a dead format, right? I think there was like a Grand PLA that was middle of August. Standard was about to rotate. No one cared. Standard wasn't very fun. And so like it had low attendance and that was fine.
I guess like you can do a smaller scale event on purpose, but like I don't think that there is any reason to hope for attendance to go down from anybody's perspective, like
sure.
Channel Fireball is able to like consistently bring 1,000 to 2,000 people to Magicfests like year round, however many times a year, 35 or whatever. I mean, I don't know how many it is,
right.
but like around the world, right? Like they were able to do that. And like it was pretty rare that a GP had less than like 800 people or whatever. So will they still be able to do that? Maybe not. But like, I think from their perspective, why would you strive for something less than that?
Sure.
And I mean, if you have maybe they have a smaller budget and so they have no choice, or maybe they get a lot of their organized play incentives stripped away by Wizards where you don't qualify for anything if you win one. I don't foresee that, but in the event that happens, if Wizards pulls back on paper organized play, or at the very least puts it more at the LGS level or something, yeah, I mean, I still think as Channel Fireball, you're like, okay, well, what can we do with the budget that we have, with the support from Wizards that we have to get the best attendance that we can?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it's kind of an interesting coin where I do know like one of the reasons that Wizards was or Channel Fireball was having the issues it was having, like there was like an artist protest in reference to Channel Fireball events because they weren't paying artists to show up and they were getting all this free advertising, and not to mention content creators and other things that they were trying to get to the shows.
They were kind of treating it like it was a favor to them. You as an artist are coming here to sell your stuff, sell your prints and sell your signature
mats
and charge people to sign their mat or whatever. And that can be decent money as an artist, especially if you know how to hustle. But like that's not how other conventions treat artists. If I'm a Magic artist, I can go to Gen Con and get paid as like a special guest. I get my name in the brochure. People come because I'm there. I don't go because people are there.
Right. But part of that is, was that my understanding is that Channel Fireball actually underbid pretty much everyone else in their bid to be able to do the reason Channel Fireball got it is they underbid to Wizards just how much this was going to cost them and how much this was going to cost Wizards. And so they, like, the entire time they were doing that endeavor, they were hurting or barely making it work. And that's why all of those things were happening, right? They wouldn't do that there. This thing would be different here.
So I wonder if they won out. I wonder if they don't want to be the sole TO for GPs.
Right.
Or for Magic
they
Fest.
got out of their contract.
I hadn't heard that, but this might have been good for them if they were losing money.
Right. Or they ask for more, or it becomes more limited. Or I guess part of the point is that if they were to do it again, it's kind of the post office problem. You know how like the post office isn't profitable, but the reason the post office isn't profitable is because they have to have offices in the middle of a single town, like a single person town in Oklahoma that no one but one person has access to. Because for the mail to work the way it does, everyone in the country needs some amount of access to the post office. And Channel Fireball is dictated by Wizards, like, oh, you have to have events in these countries, in these areas. You have to put an event in this city.
You have to do this many per year, even when Standard is about to rotate. You got to do it.
And if Channel Fireball is now up to like just picking where they're going to do it. I mean, like, look at Star City Games, right? Star City Games stopped doing events in California. I like
one every year during Kamikaze at the LA Convention Center, like across the hall.
First time I met Glenn was at Kamikaze at an SCG event when he interviewed us about top decking.
We're not making money flying to these events. We would rather just drive a truck. So East Coast and Midwest only. Sorry.
Yep. And I think like that's what happens, right? Like if Wizards isn't dictating these events have to happen at these locations, regardless of how profitable they are, that puts events into a much more like you have to be in a privileged location to be able to attend one of these big events, which sucks. I think that is a big negative. I mean, like, South America has complained about this issue across the board. The limited amount of support that they get and the fact that they're included as the Americas when they're like a totally separate continent has always
Yeah.
been a big limiting factor to them. And honestly, of all of the arguments we got from last week's episode on the Walking Dead series, the one that I am most conscientious of or the most willing to kind of secede on is like international secret layers suck. And I don't know if there's a good solution for them other than like offering them for sale on whatever distribution model that you distributed other things to those retailers, or at least stuff
Yeah,
like The Walking Dead.
they probably are going to have to go through distributors to do international or whatever. They're going to have to partner with somebody who has the ability to drop ship these to Europe and South America and wherever else, but then that adds cost.
Right. And that makes something so much more expensive. Like Magic is so much more expensive in Brazil, a country that the like how far your dollar goes is much lower. Like for instance, we have trouble selling our under $10 product of Spring Summer toys because a $10 hoop, that would be how much it would cost in Brazil, is significantly more than what normally would be spent on a toy. So like Magic being more expensive there, a game that in the United States is an expensive hobby. And then they add the layer that like tournament organizers don't focus on that location sucks. And yeah, so I it's going to be interesting to see like, do they come back? What system do they follow? Do they even follow anything close? I do think just like running 4 major tournaments per region, not tournaments, conventions, and just doing it that model. And then like let the SCGs and Channel Fireballs do their regional tournament series. And maybe you brought this up last time. What if you just gave SCG PT access?
They did. That was one piece of big news from the last OP announcement that I covered on the podcast was that they were giving SCG a few PT invites, presumably to use as they chose. Like they give it to put it in their invitationals, or maybe they do opens, or I'm guessing that like there were some terms and conditions from Wizards, but for the most part, SCG was going to choose how to use them. Don't know because we didn't get told that. But SCG, Bazaar de Bagda, and they said they were going to do some other partners, but those are the 2 they named in the article.
Right.
Bazaar de Bagda being a big South and Central American TO. And so, yeah, like they were going to start to branch out a little bit and kind of, okay, well, Channel Fireball gets all the Magicfests, and we're going to support those in the way they're going to support those, but we're going to spread organized play out a little bit. Like Magicfests don't have to be the only way to do organized play. Magicfests aren't the only way to like qualify for the Pro Tour and get into like the Wizards official circuit or whatever. So one thing that I'd been advocating for, I think I've done it on the podcast, but I've definitely done it in a lot of private conversations, is that Magicfests are just conventions. And I think that they are better when they're conventions, especially with them stripping away pro points and stripping away invites to the point where each GP is getting, or each Magic Fest was getting like 1 invite or something plus prize money. They didn't strip away the prize money, but it's like you're just turning this into a convention. You're inviting more cosplayers, more artists, you're doing more panels, you're doing more special events like, play Cube Draft with your favorite streamers and or pros or whoever and pay to play in that.
Magicfest exclusive project like mystery boosters where it's like this making these more things that you have to go to experience specific things.
And that's a product that is literally for Magicfests. I mean, obviously they distributed them to stores as well during COVID, which sucked, but like it would have been fun chaos drafts. But the fact that there were like test cards that they printed, like they went to the effort of like designing and printing those and figuring out a frame that worked and did all the graphic design. I mean, obviously they're like kind of ugly, but like it still worked to do that. And that was just for Magicfest. So like Magicfests are conventions. You should pay for a badge.
Absolutely.
Like,
security would be better if you paid for a badge.
Yes. Here's my proposal for Magicfests. You pay for a badge. It's $5 or $10. It doesn't have to be a lot. But if you enter one of the Grand Prix tournaments, or they can make a list of tournaments if you enter any of these tournaments. If you spend $20 on any combination of tournaments, you like get a credit, right? Because Channel Fireball is doing everything digitally now anyway. So you would buy a badge on their website. Your name would be in the system. When you go to sign up for the event, it would say like you have a $10 credit because you bought a badge, or a $20 credit, or a $30 credit, whatever they have to charge to make it work, right? You get a credit towards the Command Fest, or maybe the Command Fest is part of your package when you sign up or whatever. There's all sorts of ways to give you a credit with your badge that makes it not feel bad. that you can like easily recoup that value, get the EV, whatever Magic players like to do, but like just charge people to come in the door, and that way you can pay your artists, you can pay your panelists, you can pay for more cool stuff, and it doesn't just feel like a tournament with like a weird free convention grafted onto it.
Yeah, if you by paying to enter the into the show, you get like X amount of drafts per day, passes you buy, plus command zone access, plus maybe like one or two other cool swag items, or just the swag item you get from entering the GP. Like if I enter a Grand Prix, I get a playmat, I get a promo card, and I get like a Pat of Pepper, a cool case, like some other random adjacent Channel Fireball merch. Just give that to every person who enters, but every person
Yeah, give
enters has
everybody
to
a
pay.
promo.
Yeah, give everyone a promo.
There's like a promo if you get the command vest. Maybe it's a Soul Ring or whatever they decide to do next year, Arcane Signet or something. You know, they give you some commander staple that's cool for Command Fest. If you join the Grand Prix, they give you some cool tournament staple like
Right.
the Primeval Titan, Stoneforge Mystic, whatever they've done in the past. And if you just walk in the door, you get something too. Maybe you get a cool basic land or
Yeah.
a
Or the command
like
zone promo is the promo for everyone who enters, and then there's an additional one if you are in the Grand Prix, right? Like you can do, because I think like in some ways this is just a command zone.
The one thing that I don't love about the like tournament with a free convention grafted onto it is that people go to Magic Fest for so many different reasons, and if they want people to go for reasons other than a tournament or other than a command fest or whatever, they need to make sure that the pricing scheme works for everybody. Like
Sure.
if I'm paying to get into the command fest, but all I want to do is play modern in the main event, like it sucks to be like, oh, I'm paying $50 for this stupid command zone pass that I don't want. Like get this out of here. Like I don't want a Soul Ring. So that's why I'm thinking
Sure.
like a credit that you can put towards stuff or different packages that you buy when you buy your badge, right? Like maybe it's just $10 to walk around, but I can pay $50 to get into the command zone or $60 to get into my whatever, and it comps your badge because people are going to these things and spending money anyway. There's very few people just sitting in tables for free doing literally nothing that involves money. The one problem is that Channel Fireball makes a lot of their money. So SCG makes their money off buying cards. Channel Fireball makes their money off like selling space to vendors, artists included, unfortunately. But people are less likely to show up to sell their cards. Like a lot of times, me or other people that I know would like wait for a GP to come into town because they can like shop their cards around to a bunch of people and negotiate in person and find cool stuff to trade for with their store credit or whatever. And so that gets harder if you have to pay. Like
Sure.
if I'm taking $20 off the top of whatever cards I sell because I have to buy a badge, like that does feel kind of bad.
You could also have the shopping section of a Grand Prix outside of the main convention.
That's true. They would have to they'd have to get another hall because there's enough vendors. There's so many vendors.
That's
And
true.
I also think the vendors being close to the tables is super beneficial because what happens is people are in the main event, they're playing mono red, so they finish their match. They like go walk around the hall, look at cards. Like what are they doing? They're just waiting for their match. They can't leave the hall. They can't go join a draft. They're just gonna, walk around, look at cards. Maybe they buy something. Maybe they see something they want to buy later.
Yeah, it's like that's probably the biggest issue, or maybe just Channel Fireball has a like I'll buy your cards out in front if you want to get access to be able to barter with people. It'll be an extra $20, and hopefully your collection is worth enough where you're making the margin there. But yeah, I also think I think security would be better. I guess on Shivan Bot's podcast, Casual Magic, a few weeks ago, and basically what we ended up talking was just like the history of like the forefront of casual content creation and where that has kind of lied in the eyeballs of viewers over the last decade. Because when I started making content creation with Top Decking, it basically was us and Loading Ready Run. And just like every other Magic content creator was making content for tournament play Magic. There was like SEG and like there was like, the Sheldon was making Commander content, but it was like not nearly as established as it is now. They hadn't made a Commander set yet even. And like the closest thing to casual content were like actually now most of them are weirdly problematic. We're like the Travis Woos of the world who are making like brews that aren't good, but let's take them for a spin.
I mean, I assume at the time there were also like people doing like box openings or collector stuff, like alpha investments type stuff. Like, was any of that around back then?
So pack openings were happening. Like the biggest Magic YouTuber at the time of I think Top Decking was a pack opener, right?
I figured that's universal for any collectible. Correct. It's got to be. I mean, obviously, like MTG Finance has gone through the roof since then as well, but there had to have been something,
and Magic Find, there was other content creation. Yeah, the statement that there was no one else but us and LLR is definitely fictitious, but it was like a much smaller focus, and the bigger players in Magic were not making that content. It was people on their own on YouTube YouTube or on smaller platforms, or, because there's always like, there's the Goblin Lore, or that one website that Jules was a big part of, that they were like doing custom
Gathering
sets.
Magic.
Gathering Magic was also a blog site that was coming out with articles, but it was still pretty pro Magic play focused. Jules
Yeah,
wrote for
well,
them, but
Jules
he
wrote
was
commander articles for them. Oh, you talking about Goblin Artisans?
yes, I'm talking
The
about
like
Goblin
design
Artisans.
blog.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that was like a blog. I guess it's content, right? But
Right.
nobody was
But
getting
like,
paid for it.
it was much more Wild West. And then, and we talk, definitely recommend listening to that because we go through a whole thing. But basically, over the last 10 years, pro players as a focus of personality within Magic have fallen to no longer be the most significant thing. And people like Jimmy and Josh, or Christine Sparkle, or Tappy, or Olivia, Shivam, for that matter, who are making content that's much more focused on not just who wins the tournament in Magic, but like the culture around Magic and the people in Magic. And that's a lot of content for a convention, right? Like, we've done panels of cool, fun games. Tappy does one, did 2 last year. We did 2 last year. There's like all of the different artist stuff that you can do. There's obviously the Infinity cosplayer stuff that goes on. Like, there's so much cool stuff that goes on at a convention that having a real budget behind it could do really cool stuff. You could do stuff like the escape room, the Innistrad escape rooms that they did at GP Chicago or Detroit right before Shadows over Innistrad came out, and like during Eldrazi Winter. And like, that stuff was really cool. And I think more of that is good. And I'd rather have some big events that kind of focuses on cool stuff than necessarily doing thousands of regional tournaments, I guess.
Yeah, and I do agree. I mean, the thing is, like, if they want to have paper organized play, you got to do thousands of regional turns. But, like, you can decentralize a little bit, do more PTQs, less Magic Fest. But at the end of the day, like, having too much OP focused in the LGS, like the Planeswalker point system, or, PPTQs or whatever, is like kind of tough, because like some people, they go to their LGS and they play in a 500 person PTQ or whatever, and some people go to their LGS and they play in like a 16 person PTQ. It just feels like
It's weighted weirdly.
it's like yeah, it's weird. It's not like super duper problematic, because at the end of the day, everybody goes to the Pro Tour and plays the same tables with the same people. But like,
I got basically the invention of the PPTQ system was the invention of me no longer wanting to play pro play, because it went from a big PTQ that was basically a mini GP that I would prioritize going once a season. It would happen at one of like 2 locations in the area. Maybe I would do 2 if we got lucky. And that was great because I could prioritize that, right? I could be like, okay, this Sunday I'm going to do that. But with the PPTQ system, it was like, there was a
grind every week or
every
die.
weekend. Yeah. And like, eventually I was like, well, my now wife, then girlfriend, was just like absolutely not going to let me play in a Magic tournament every weekend.
Like, I don't want to. I don't want to play in a
yeah.
Magic tournament every weekend. I have other interests. I want to hang out with people. I want to use my Disneyland pass that I have no idea what it's going to look like going forward. But
no idea. Yeah, like just like prepping for one PTQ or one for GP is a blast. Doing the 2-week grind beforehand of mastering for the format, figuring out what your sideboard is going to be, doing all the analysis you can, and then doing well in it, you feel like a mini Pro Tour player, right? Like, it's one of the things that's cool. When you have to do a weekly event at LGS, it's not that you're now a grinder, and that's a lifestyle, and some people can be good at it, but I don't think it's good for every person. Now, on the other hand, if I'm Wizards and I'm looking, what's the most feasible way for me to have paper Magic Pro play happen with the least amount of investment on our part, that does give benefits to LGSs in a time where people think we need to do more of that, that's the system that I would look at. Like, it does suck
Right.
from a grinder perspective, but there's also an argument that, like, maybe if you want to be a professional Magic player, you have to do grinding.
They're also providing more paths, right? I mean, in order to be successful on Arena, it's a lot of grinding, don't get me wrong, but it's a much different type of grinding than going to a PPTQ every weekend, right? So they are providing multiple paths to pro play. And in fact, even Grand Prix was a path to pro play, right? It's never been the best one, but it is one that people have been successful at. So, you go, you qualify for your first PT, you do well enough to PT to qualify for the next PT, and bam, you're a pro player because you top 8 at a GP or whatever, top 4, so
Right.
it happens. And, there's so many pros and cons, but I think paper play will come back in some way. And I do hope that LGSs get their piece of the pie, but at the end of the day, you do have to have big regional tournaments, be they PTQs or GPs or whatever, because I think you need a step between LGS and the PT,
Yeah.
at least
Agreed.
one.
Yeah. And I don't think GPs are going away. And maybe it's like GPs become more conventions. But like PTQs take over. Because the problem with that happened with PTQs, the reason the PTQ system went away was because they became unmanageable tournaments. The attendance of these events were larger than GPs, but they were single day events. And there was no way, like your cut to top 8 would just like have like weird percentage points because your round 1 opponent decided to drop out of the tournament after the first round. You could have had a perfect record for the rest of the day, but because that happened, you couldn't top 8. So like,
yeah, especially in places like SoCal, our PTQs were just like 500 people or whatever.
right.
It was like
And
crazy.
so I think there's a possibility of doing something like a 2-day PTQ system that's like meant to be a smaller version of a GP, and then have GPs go more the way of big tournaments that are less often and have wider distribution. And like, maybe you create a hybrid model of those two
Yeah.
things.
One thing that I do like is the command fests that they piloted right before COVID, where they did 2 of them in the winter, right?
They did 2 in November and 1 in December. They did Chicago. Yeah, it was all in the winter. It was Chicago and Seattle were the same day. And then they did DC.
SCG ran the DC one.
Yep, in December.
Yeah, so they just started that. They were presumably collecting data. They were going to plan more. Gavin was tweeting about it like, "Oh, everybody loves this. We're going to plan more. Don't worry, guys." And then it was like, there's a pandemic, sorry. But that is a step in the right direction to me because that is like a Magic convention that's completely decoupled from competitive play.
Correct.
Because I don't necessarily think that this convention model serves competitive play because like you said, you want like a handful of big conventions a year. You
Right.
want 4
Things to
max in North
prioritize.
America and maybe 1 in Europe, 1 in Asia or whatever, 1 in South America, wherever you want to do the big ones. But you don't want more than like, 10 globally around the world. But you're going to have more than 10 tournaments around the world. So
And I think it'll be interesting. Like, well, there was interesting things with the Command Fest, right? The one in DC, you did have to pay to get entry, right? It was using that model. As you mentioned, retailers hated it. For 2 reasons. One, because the type of cards they sell at those events are different than pro play. You don't have people on the first day trying to buy the staples they need to win. You have commander players who have 1 deck and like maybe want 1 card. So your POS is low. And they also don't necessarily have like the last year's worth of draft chaff in a box that they need to get rid of and offload to sell to you. So you're missing on both ends of like buying and selling at these events. And then your point,
working at a store, commander player buying habits are super duper weird because everybody needs like weird stuff. They typically do not sell cards except like once every 5 years in a huge chunk, which can be good for a retailer, but if you hit people on their off years.
Honestly, yeah, I think like the CEDH community is maybe one of the biggest benefits to vendors at these events in a long time. Maybe
mean, Commander is also constantly growing. Like the state of Commander after this year is probably different from what was when they ran the Command Fests, honestly. Like it's continuously growing more and more, and they're printing more product specifically for Commander. Like if you're a vendor and you bring your stock of like cool Secret Lair foils and Commander Legends etched foils or whatever, maybe you do make a killing in a Command Fest. Who knows?
And I would even point out that like there are things that are easy to go. Like they didn't have mystery boosties at the Command Fests, which was like a mistake, right? Like they could have very easily just had limited events.
They existed at the time, did they?
They did, because they piloted it at the GP in October, and so it was like October onwards. Remember, there's the end of the year tournaments. You could just grab them and drop out, and they were like each worth $40 or something ridiculous. And so they like when we did Reno, the judge showed up and opened it for us, making sure we.
Well, and a lot of my drafts at Reno were with primarily Commander playing friends, like Shivam and Olivia and people who just wanted to get a fun commander or a fun casual chaos draft in, and everybody had a blast. And then they went on to do their like mystery booster box sealed with where they played commander, which was kind of a precursor to Boxing League.
Yeah.
When they did the mystery booster boxes. So like there is there's enough sealed product that appeals to commander players. You can run drafts. You can run Commander Legends drafts. You can run Battle Bond drafts if you've got them in the vault. You can run Chaos drafts or Mystery Booster drafts or Two-Headed Giant draft or of a standard set. You like there's ways to monetize a Command Fest better if the money isn't there.
Right.
But also you're charging for passes to get in, and people are getting promos and they're getting some sort of prizes, which prizes are sketch to me, but they were doing it. So
and the pricing was always like you get some tickets. That was always the funny thing. Like at Command Fests in general, there's this like underlying, you could get points and turn those points into the prize wall that I just degaffed on 100% of
Same.
the time. I just was like, oh, like someone's like, oh, I want to do a point game. And I was like, what does that even mean? I did not read the directions that far. But yeah, so like, and the incentivization, if people want to be incentivized, that's fine. I also think like, playing with Power and Braden from the CDH cast have run CDH tournaments, right? There's a way to do it, and they've had success at it. And doing that as a small event on the side where people are also playing Commander that are casual and just have a space, I think there's a way to cater to all of these things. And I think just like the problem I had with the Command Fest system was that there are like, I wanted a hybrid. I want a Magic Fest without the Grand Prix, basically. And I just like, or have the Grand Prix, but like have the whole thing be catered in all directions. And I think it would be really successful. And I don't think you need that. Like do panels, do cosplay things, have artists.
And I think the Command Fest was an experiment in that direction.
Right.
They weren't the full Magic Fest because I don't think that the TOs were willing to go all in. They were a step where it's like, what if we just run a completely casual Magic convention, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to give them all the trimmings to start out, but let's see how it goes. Let's see if we Wizards like it. Let's see if whatever TO is running it likes it. Let's see if the players like it, vendors, we can make something work here maybe.
We have our
and
list
that's why it was cool that we were like right on the cusp of that. And then SCG had been running conventions for all of 2020, and I think they ran them in 2019 too. They do two, right?
The SCG cons, yeah, they have two, and they're really successful. I mean, that's like that for sure. When talking to Tappy or Christine, that's their favorite event
about them.
Yeah, that's their like favorite event of the year.
Yeah, and they do run their invitational there, so they have like a big event there, but it's not an open event. But they also have open events, and they also have like panels and cosplayers and everything else. It was like their way of trying to like create a GP Vegas situation at on their coast.
Right. I was like literally prioritizing going to spring SCG Con in 2020, and then COVID happened.
Yeah, but there's just been a lot of like, a lot of recognition in the last couple years, and I think especially this year, that like casual play is big and you can cater to it. You don't need to have everything be a tournament.
Right. Like that was the whole, I mean, we've talked on the cast 100 times about how Command Fests happen, or not even Command Fest, how Command Zones happened, right? Where like Grand Prix LA with 30 of the bigger content creators in the world, we're all stuck in like a small food court outside the convention hall trying to make Commander games work, including
and
Wizards
all
employees.
Tweeting angrily about it.
Tweeting angrily about it. And the next event, they had a Command Zone.
I actually do like competitive Magic. I am hopeful for a world in which like we can have these Magic conventions that do not focus on competitive Magic. And I do think the state of pro play sucks, and I wish that it was better. Like at Reno, where we're like hanging with all our Commander player friends, we're going to the Command Zone, we're playing Commander, we're going doing mystery boosty drafts, we're doing more casual Magic because we're hanging out with casual friends. I did like go do a couple standard drafts because I'm like, I'm at a GP. I need some competition. Yeah, I mean, like I loved playing the main events and stuff too, and that's why I do hope that these things follow SCG Con's lead, where you do some big open tournaments. They just don't need to be a Grand Prix that qualifies you for the Pro Tour necessarily.
Or they could be like multiple PTQs. Like you do an invitational, multiple PTQs, and you're there. Or you do, or you just have a Grand Prix. Like, to be honest, the fact that the Grand Prix is there is not a problem. I have no problem with the Grand Prix being there. I do think that you can have the Grand Prix there and just have the Grand Prix entry include entry to the convention, right? Like that can easily be what that is.
Right, because then tournament players are still going to show up. They're going to spend the same amount of money. They're not going to be mad about the badge fee because it just rolls into the price of their tournament. But you get to make money off people who want to get their card signed, and you're paying the artist. So maybe getting their card signed is a lot cheaper.
Also, just security wise, you don't have like random people who may want to do harm to people to walk in, or you don't have like the incentive of just like going there to steal some stuff is less because you had to pay to get in there, and you can pay to have cosplayers have cool stuff, or you can do panels because you're charging people to go in. You can pay for stuff to be cool that's there for them to do.
Right. And you can pay for installations like an escape room or something or whatever, right? I mean, the other thing that, and I think SCG Con does do it this way, the 2-day tournament is tricky because like I am at a Magic convention. I want to do a lot of cool Magic convention stuff while I'm there. I only go to a few a year pretty much, like 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So like I want to go hang out with my friends that I don't see all the time. I want to go get cards signed. I want to go check out the cool foils at the vendors or whatever. But like I'm locked into this 2-day tournament. And it feels really bad. Like I made day 2 of Vegas, and it's Vegas, right? It's the biggest Magic Fest of the year every year. And I'm like drafting, and I go like, I don't know, 2-1 in my first draft or something. And I'm like, well, I'm X4 now, I think. Could probably still cash. I'm gonna take my packs, Judge. I'm out of here.
Right. And I think that in some ways, like you can also limit it to have like a Grand Prix and PTQs. And in your position, you probably should just do PTQs. That still allows you
Right.
to be
Like if I could have
competitive.
one day of competitive, like that's why GP Vegas was so great for me because I had one day of competitive Magic. I had another day where I just hung out in the command zone all day
Right,
and just like chilled, you know?
right.
And
And
that's like my dream event, right? Like I know that there are people on other sides where they would play on Saturday PTQ and the Sunday PTQ if they didn't make it, right?
yeah,
And that's like a day that's a 2-day tournament for you. You know what?
yeah,
It's fine. And like some people just want to chill in the command fest the whole time. They don't care for competitive Magic. Maybe
right.
they want to do some chaos booster draft on the side or whatever, go to a panel. But like I want all of it.
And honestly, I would cap them. Like if the problem is these tournaments are so popular that there's a 2-day event, like cap it.
Well, I mean, if you run two,
Yeah, you run two. And so like for the
yeah,
PTQ problem I was describing, right? The problem with PTQs is that they're open events. They like it was hard to cap them, and because they only happened in that area once in a while. But if these events, if you have two of them and you say we're capping this at X, sorry, and or even we're capping it at X, but top 4 gets a Pro Tour invite and top 16 gets day 2 entry and gets 2 buys or something. There's like different ways you could do it that makes it so it even feels attached. There's like ways to do that is not hard that could make a really cool experience and still allow the Michaels of the world to go through a tournament, feel great about it, and then go hang out with people on the next day or whatever, what have you. So I think
yeah.
there's like
I opened like a Force of Negation and a Renin 6 for my GP entry. I got 2 drafts worth of Modern Horizons and a sealed. It was, I mean, I felt accomplished for making day 2. I always like, I really enjoy competitive Magic, but I don't think my skill level is there to expect to cash a GP. I've never done it before. I don't expect to top 8 the PTQ even.
right.
But I like the thrill of playing competitively,
Yeah.
like I think that's an important part of Magic to me. And I would like to be able to get that at my Magic convention while also jamming some Commander and hanging out with my friends and.
And to be honest, if what you described was available for a 3-day event, I would definitely do one of the 1-day PTQs and then like 2 other days hang out with friends. Like, or like Friday, Saturday, hang out with friends. And then on the Sunday where like I live in LA, the thing happened in Vegas, my flight's 30 minutes long and I'm not even driving and I can just like do that event. Everyone's leaving anyways because they have to fly to go back home to Minneapolis or DC or New York. And so like I can that's the day I don't have as many friends. I get to play in a tournament. I lose normally and I go home with whatever cool experience I had to try and win. So like, yeah, I think there's really cool ways to do it to blend all these models. And I do think that this moment gives Wizards the chance to really try and see if they want to reset and figure out a new system that works
Yeah.
better for everyone.
Yeah, my concern is that we haven't seen, so I guess it's like a concern and possibly also an explanation. We haven't seen them do anything to digital play this year, despite the fact that all play has been digital. They pretty much have just been like, yeah, stay the course, no paper this year, but we'll figure it out. So that either means they're going to be doing a big announcement that involves paper and digital, or maybe it means they're not thinking about it right now. They're thinking
Yeah.
about other COVID related stuff, right? Like there's a lot going on in Magic at all times, including in the physical space and the digital space. And maybe if they're putting off GPs until 2022, maybe they're just now starting to talk about it. Who knows?
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know. That's why I was thinking like CFBE and SCG and whoever else might be taking the reins going forward because they want to get things going quickly. And Wizards is like, oh, actually, we've kind of been focusing on XYZ right now. I don't know. Here's some promos.
Yeah. I mean, there's like an argument that like their model survives now without tournament play. Like arena needs something, I guess. But even that, like I think there's a lot of people out there, like the majority of people that spend money on Magic do not care about tournament play.
It's true, and that's always been true. But I don't believe the doomsayers that are like, oh, they're obviously moving all tournament play to arena and they're going to phase out paper tournament play and it's going to be all commander. I don't believe that in the same way that I don't believe they're going to phase
Sure.
out MTGO. Like all these different ways to play mesh together, and they have been better or worse at meshing them together at different points in history. But I don't think that this is their window to just kill paper OP.
I agree. I agree.
I think it's going to look different, and it may be more decentralized. It may be more centralized if they do, 10 Magic Fests a year and they're all very important, or maybe it's more decentralized and they just do a bunch of PTQs, or maybe they go back to normal and, with
Right.
some Command Fest, right? They do Magic Fests as they were before, but here's a new type of Magic Fest. It's a Command Fest. We're going to focus more of our efforts getting cosplayers and artists at these things. We're going to charge people at the door to do more special events. And the Magic Fests are just GPs now, basically, like old
Right.
GPs, where they didn't focus on the fest part. It was more the magic, right? Here's the magic. Here's the fest. So
Yeah. I think they could do that. That's like, and honestly, that's like the most likely alternative. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I do think that the next 6 months is going to be a moment where they kind of have to start thinking about it. I don't think this stuff gets implemented until the following year, and I think that we'll see where it ends up.
we'll see an announcement of an announcement of an announcement pretty soon, I'm sure.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.